The Honda CR-V gets a few little changes here for the 2026 model year and the addition of this new TrailSport version for the first time ever on the CR-V. And in this video, I'll cover the exterior, the interior, take it for a drive and see what it's like out on the road, as well as talking about the kind of fuel economy you can expect and also the pricing and how it compares to the competition these days. And so as far as the 2026 CR-V, well, the basic changes for all CR-Vs is that you now have black window surrounds on the hybrid and there's some new wheel designs. And that's pretty much it. There are a couple other tweaks on the inside, which we'll get to in a minute. But the main thing here is this TrailSport version, which is what we have here in this beautiful ash green metallic paint, which is also exclusive to the TrailSport and new for 2026, of course, as well. And so as far as this TrailSport version, it's not quite as extreme as some of the others like the Subaru Forester Wilderness. We basically just have all-terrain tires and a little dress up and a slight enhancement to the all-wheel drive system, but that's about it. So up front there, you'll see that nothing has changed for 2026. You get a skid plate garnish. It's not an actual skid plate, but you get, something that looks like one there on the bottom of the front bumper. But otherwise, no changes up front there. Still a nice looking vehicle though, for sure, in my opinion. And then coming down to the sides, you get, again, these wheels with a shark gray finish for these 18-inch wheels that are unique to the TrailSport, and you have these Continental cross-contact all-terrain tires, which are true all-terrains. They're nice and knobby, so that is nice to see. It's an improvement over some of the others that have had some weaker off-road tires in the past, so legit off-road tires are certainly welcome here. But that's pretty much it as far as the actual off-road ability improvements. There's also some slight improvements to the all-wheel drive system I'll get to later. But otherwise, side is no different. You just have black mirror caps and door handles here for these. And then going out to the back, you can see another garnish there on the bottom of the rear bumper, which is a little bit unique there, but no actual extra durability or anything. And otherwise, again, still all the same out back there. You do have black badging and of course that TrailSport badge, but otherwise still the same very attractive looks we've had here for many years now on the CR-V, but looks great. And this is still a sales success for Honda, with these selling over 400,000 units of the CR-V last year. So if it's good and they got a good thing going, why change it? The interior of the 2026 CR-V gets very, very minor changes here, just to basically the available equipment and some changes to the infotainment system I don't love. I'll talk about that in a second. Now for the TrailSport here, the unique stuff that you get are just these cloth seats, which do have the orange stitching here and the TrailSport logo in the headrest. And then otherwise you get amber ambient lighting, and then you have the TrailSport all-weather mats here that come in these. That's it. So there's no other unique stuff here about it. But starting off with these seats, these are really nice cloth seats. Now it is worth noting that many of the competitors will give you leather or leatherette seats at their comparable kind of trims, but if you don't mind the cloth, it does breathe a little bit nicer than some of the leatherettes do sometimes. And they're an attractive design and do feel good. You do have power adjustments here, as well as also even like your lumbar adjustment, which is great. And they're very nice and comfortable seats here. I actually did about 4 hours on the highway in this vehicle and had no complaints here with the seat comfort. Moving on to the steering wheel here, again, more orange stitching, but otherwise it's the same great Honda wheel. I really do love this wheel though. It's wonderfully simple with just a few buttons on it here, some nice feeling scrollers and little paddle shifters here on the back. This one is also heated. TrailSport gets a heated steering wheel. It's the only other one other than the Sport Touring, which is the top trim, to get a heated steering wheel as standard. Now you can option it on. Honda does this odd thing where it's kind of like a dealer installed accessory. I believe you can get a heated steering wheel on almost all trims, but really nice you have it here, all standard on the TrailSports. And moving on to the gauge cluster, that is one of the differences here. So you do get the 10.2-inch digital gauge cluster here in the TrailSport, and for 2026 this gauge cluster has been brought down. So it used to be just in I believe the top trim. Now it's brought down, so EXL and higher trims now get the digital cluster. You'll go to the smaller partially digital cluster still in the trims lower than that, but they're really nice gauges. And I do like how there's a little bit of adjustability to them there, and I like how you can see like a display of your all-wheel drive system and how it's working, or your power meter there and how that all is playing out. But really nice gauges, and I have no complaints with those either. Now moving on to the middle of the dashboard here, another change here for 2026 is that all CR-Vs now get this 9-inch touchscreen as standard. Previously, you'd go down to a 7-inch screen with wired Apple CarPlay and wired Android Auto. And I believe once you went up to like EXL or higher or something like that, you got the 9-inch screen. But anyway, now the 9-inch screen is standard and everything, so that means everyone has wireless Apple CarPlay, wireless Android Auto, which is certainly appreciated. But in this switchover, one thing that we've lost is Sirius satellite radio, or basically the ability for the head unit to do anything other than Apple CarPlay or Android Auto. It does have a radio tuner, so you still have FM, AM, Bluetooth audio streaming, of course, all the basic stuff there, but they dropped Sirius XM and they dropped any other functionality in that screen. So now it's basically just there to mirror your smartphone. If you don't do that, just know that you only have radio controls, and that's all it's going to really give you in there. So that's kind of an interesting switch there. I mean, it works fine. I think that's what most people will use these for anyway, and the fact that especially now it's all wireless means it's not a real big loss. But, you know, for Sirius XM, I know a lot of people do really like that. And the only workaround that I've used in other Hondas and Acuras that have also made this switch, it seems like all Honda Automotive has dropped Sirius XM for some reason. I don't know why. But so the only workaround is to have the app running on your CarPlay or Android Auto. And that requires an internet connection though. But that's going to be the only way to do Sirius. But it does work that way if you want to run it as an app. But other than that, you know, no way to actually have it from the satellite here into the car. Now coming down, you have your same great climate controls we've had for this whole generation. Really nice feel, and Honda does some of the best switchgear and trim. I mean, arguably you could say it's the best. I think them and Mazda are really kind of towards the top of the pack there. There are some others that have gotten a lot nicer here, but I still think Honda really takes the cake for that, even though, you know, there's other things where they have fallen behind, like the screen is basically smaller than everybody else out there these days. But for those, again, who don't need the biggest screens, you know, again, all this is totally fine. But anyway, coming down, you have a nice wide open bin here with 2 USB-C jacks and a power outlet and a Qi wireless charging pad, which is also standard here for 2026 in all CR-Vs, which is nice for sure. And it does have little brackets and it's kind of rubberized, but I've found that this wireless charging pad still doesn't do super reliable wireless charging. You go around a corner a little too quickly, you know, it slides right off of there. So I still think Hyundai takes the crown for the best wireless charging pad. Theirs has a raised little bump that actually holds your phone on there better. But, you know, still nice that it's standard here for all of these. And then coming back, you still have a regular shifter, which is also interesting because some others are going to a column-mounted shifter these days and opening up all this space to be an extra bin. We don't have that here, but if you like a physical shifter, you have that still. And just a couple other basic buttons. You have your 2 cup holders here, and then you have another little bonus spot and the center armrest, which is nice and softly padded. You open that up, and you have a nice, deep, and long space there. Really nice and usable. And you also do have pockets in the doors for the bottle holder. And while we're in this area, you'll see that also the TrailSport does not get any kind of stereo upgrade. Many of the other competitors will give you a stereo upgrade in their comparable off-roady kind of trim. We just have the standard 8-speaker Honda system here. If you want the 12-speaker Bose stereo in the CR-V, you still have to go up to the top Sport Touring trim in order to get that. You know, the Honda Bose system is very, very good. I actually really enjoyed it. I think it's one of the best in this segment. But this bass stereo is actually completely fine. Again, I spent 4 hours on the road just listening to podcasts and some music and stuff. You know, I have no complaints with it. Sure, the Bose is still better, but you know, if you know it's not a must-have thing for you, don't feel like you're missing out by not getting that system. It's really not too big of a deal in my opinion. One other little thing here before we move on to the back seat though is the moonroof. We still just have a regular small moonroof. I mean, it's nice we have a moonroof here in TrailSport, but many of the other competitors will give you like a panoramic roof that is really nice and large. And especially if you are adventuring in a vehicle like this, especially for those backseat occupants, being able to have a nice big glass roof is certainly appreciated. And even like the Subaru Forester Wilderness, you know, has like a really oversized moonroof. It's probably double the size of this one. So, you know, one thing I wish, you know, Honda would do, but Honda still refuses to do that. They also refuse to do ventilated seats. That's another thing that some others do. So CR-V is still a little bit behind, but, you know, again, it's one of the best sellers in this segment, so clearly a lot of people don't care about not having vented seats and a big moonroof, but just know those things are unavailable here in the TrailSport or in any CR-V still. Now, moving on to the back seat here in the CR-V, though. It is a really nice and spacious back seat, one of the roomiest out there, and the thing I really love about it is the fact that the doors open up like 90 degrees, and it's arguably, I think there's maybe 1 or 2 others these days that have incorporated that, but I think this is pretty much the widest door opening. And if you do have car seats, like I have a car seat installed here, much easier to install car seats with a nice wide opening door, or just getting kids in and out. Things like that are just a lot easier here because of that. So I really love that. And then you also just have lots of leg room, good amount of headroom. When you look forward, you see they have their own air vents, as well as 2 USB-C jacks. There's a fold down center armrest as well, with 2 cup holders built into it and pockets in those doors. And then moving on to the cargo space here in the CR-V, that's another area where they arguably are one of the best. It's just such a tall space, really wide and long, but I think the height especially is a little bit more than some of the others sometimes. And little pockets there on the sides and a power outlet as well. But there is no opening floor there, so you can't lift that piece up at all, because that's where a lot of the hybrid components are. I believe non-hybrid CR-Vs, you might get something under there, but that also means we have no spare tire. There's just a little fix-a-flat thing there by the wheel well. But other than that, you don't have any spare tire here in these either, but it's so large, you could hold your own just in the regular cargo area, I suppose, if you wanted to. Overall, still just a really great amount of cargo space. But let's start up and go for a drive. The CR-V still uses Honda's newer key here, which is a really great key. It's so small. One of my favorite keys in the industry, just because of how small it is. Really just, it takes up no room in your pocket. I love that about it. And for everything except the bass drum, I don't think the bass drum is still keyless access or push button start. I think that's for EX and higher trims where you get that. But of course, here in this TrailSport, you do have that. So it is keyless access, keyless entry, and push button start. So just leave the key in your pocket, hit the engine start button, and it starts right up. And because this is a hybrid, of course, whenever you turn it on, a lot of times you'll just be in EV mode and the engine won't even start. All right, so setting off here in the CR-V TrailSport. So the first thing you notice about this vehicle, well, the first thing I really love about CR-Vs is the excellent visibility you have. You have really tall glass. I think the only one that beats it slightly is the Super Forester, but nice thin A-pillars and just a great view out, good view out of the back, just very easy to drive this vehicle. You do also have, of course, all the driver assistance stuff here, including if you go for the EXL or higher trim, you'll get low speed braking control, which means at 6 miles per hour or less, it'll automatically stop if it detects an object. It gives you park sensors there with those, which will help you even more. But of course, you have the backup camera here. Unfortunately for the TrailSport, there is no 360 camera. Some others do offer that as well, so that you have, or at least a forward-facing camera, so you have a better idea if you are doing any kind of off-roading. But this doesn't really have that. But very easy to drive, of course. Nice small vehicle. The dash drops down nicely, so very easy to see forward and all that. The other thing that I'm really impressed with here right off the bat is the lack of tire noise. All-terrain tires, you typically think you're going to have a bunch of roar from, some chunky tires, and you might hear a tiny bit more. I'd have to get a decibel meter out to really tell a difference, but honestly, this feels no different from a regular CR-V, and that also goes for the ride too. The ride is just as smooth. I don't believe there's been any suspension changes here to accommodate the tires. Maybe they've done something, they just haven't talked about it, but it's just really, really impressive with just how it feels like a regular CR-V. Also, brakes are so well done here on these hybrid Hondas. Very nice and natural and normal feeling. Very easy to be smooth with them. Throttle response is also fantastic. It starts to give you power right as you lean onto the gas. And also, this engine is so quiet, either, whenever it's off, obviously, or it's nice and quiet for electric cruising, but now, the engine's on now, and you hear it a little, but I've just found myself, where the engine's working in the background, but it's not really, running the red line or anything or trying to make a bunch of power, where in normal operation, it's one of the quietest, I'd say. Like the Toyota hybrid system, for example, is a lot noisier, and this just feels really nice and refined. And honestly, even the Mazda CX-50 hybrid, which uses Toyota tech, feels louder whenever you're accelerating than this does. So, unless your foot is to the floor, this thing is pretty quiet most of the time. And I've just been really impressed again with just how, everything just kind of fades into the background and doesn't make itself super known. Now, that was 25% power, and you still hardly hear it. But I'm going to go ahead and put it up into the sport mode, which is something that's exclusive to the hybrid versions here. And we'll turn down onto this back road here and see how it accelerates. And here we go. Nice and responsive. And you get some actual shifting, or perceived shifting. There is no real transmission here in this thing. But, good amount of punch, and, it's not going to light your hair on fire with acceleration, but it's pretty good. So we are running a 2-liter naturally aspirated 4-cylinder direct injected Honda engine, and it does, combined with this hybrid system here, 204 horsepower and 247 pound-feet of torque. And that torque figure is what is arguably one of the best in the segment, especially as far as hybrids and non-turbocharged options goes. And I think Car and Driver got like a 7.9 seconds 0 to 60. So, once you get into the higher speeds there, it does run out of steam a little bit, but around town and especially off the line there, it does have some nice punch to it. And I also like that the electric motor really does kick in pretty aggressively there, and does give you some meaningful push forward. And also when you're in sport mode here, it does kind of do a little bit more drag too with the regen. There's also this B mode, which will basically allow you to do almost one pedal driving, and that's kind of a fun little thing if you want to just, use the brake pedal a little bit less and try and maximize your efficiency and your charging of that battery. You can do that. But also, speaking of regen, if you want to play around with that, you have these paddle shifters here. And I really actually enjoy those, because like on a long downhill straight, instead of having to, ride the brakes a little bit to, get my regen and get my slowing done, I can just pull the paddles and play around with that a little bit, and, then have it go away whenever I'm not going down a hill or whatever. And I've always liked that Honda has included those paddle shifters. That's something that many others don't include with their hybrids. Others just make you, feather the brake pedal, but I like that, Honda gives you that option. Also, this road that we're on currently usually generates a lot of road noise, and in this, you hear some. It's not like we're in a Rolls Royce or anything, but it's pretty good, I gotta say. And again, one of the best ones, I think, as far as the refinement goes here. But we're coming up some corners here I always take, and let's see how the TrailSport CR-V handles. Obviously, this is gonna be the worst handling version of the CR-V just because of the tires. These tires are meant for more off-road grip, but they are still, very streetable tires. And again, this is another area where I was very impressed. It handles just like a regular CR-V. I thought maybe it'd be a little more understeery or a little more loose with the handling, because sometimes you get that with all-terrain tires, but still nice and sharp, nice and direct. You might have a tiny bit more squirm in the tire that you feel versus a regular CR-V, but I honestly don't think regular average drivers are going to notice, to be totally honest. It really is impressive how there's basically zero compromise, aside from fuel economy, which I'll get to in a little bit. But, driving-wise, there's no compromises here with these tires, so they did a really good job. And also the CR-V is just, in my opinion, I would say this is my favorite handling one of the bunch, one of the best handling ones of the bunch, and just one of my favorites to drive. Steering weight is a little bit weightier than most of the others, so it feels more connected and engaging without being overboard like CX-50 was for a while. I think they've since fixed CX-50, but regardless, everything else is a little more disconnected and a little lighter. This just, between the steering feel, the brakes, the throttle, just everything feels better to drive is the bottom line. And again, not having a transmission too means we don't have any CVT weirdness. Now, this can get a little weird with this powertrain, but even like turn signals, which I usually don't talk about turn signals, but the turn signals even feel nice to use. Everything just has a solid feel, just like the buttons and everything. And all these little things add up to just a high quality and satisfying kind of driving experience. That's, again, some of the others are pretty good too. It's not like this is the only one that's like this, but I can understand why some people go for a test drive in this and decide, I'm going to pay the little bit of extra money for the CR-V over its cheaper competitors. If you appreciate those fine details, that is where the CR-V really sets itself apart, in my opinion. And it just handles really well. I mean, especially with the hybrid here, I believe these weigh like 3,867 pounds or so. It all just does everything without any issue, and just, is a really nice driver. But now, as far as this all-wheel drive system and the off-road capability, I use quotations there because it's not one of the wholehearted ones like Super Force or Wilderness. Bottom line, if you want real off-road capability, like legitimate, like more ground clearance, unique suspension, actual skid plates, all that kind of stuff, Forza Wilderness is really what you're going to want. The Forza Wilderness is the same price as this and the way to go if you really are venturing off-road aggressively. But if you happen to be on a dirt trail pretty often, or you just feel like you have more confidence with these all-terrain tires for whatever reason, that's really what this is good for. Now for 2026, we do have an improved all-wheel drive system. That's not exclusive to TrailSport either though, but previously the all-wheel drive system would go 60% front, 40% rear was the most it could send to the rear in order to power you out of, a sticky situation or whatever. And now it's 50-50, so it can send a little more power to the rear. It also is a little more assertive with giving that power to the rear and making it, a little bit more aggressive with that, and also it'll more aggressively brake the wheels that are slipping. So you minimize the slip, maximize the grip, and again, put as much power as it can back there. And so that 50-50 split does put it on an even playing field with the Forester hybrid, which doesn't come in wilderness trim. I'll talk more about, again, that little difference in a few minutes, but that was the big thing about Forester hybrid is, it's a 50-50 true all-wheel drive system. And now, this has that actual real all-wheel drive system, just like the Subaru, and that is one thing that puts this over the RAV4 hybrid, for example, which still just has a little helper motor in the rear and doesn't have as much power going to the back end on those RAV4 hybrids, including the woodland trim that they have, compared to this, which is going to really make the difference. And anyway, we're merging onto the highway here in the CR-V hybrid. Now I'll go ahead and turn on the adaptive cruise control system, which does come standard along with traffic jam assist, lane keeping assist, all those kinds of things come standard. So we'll go ahead and put all that on here. And I use this a good bit out here on the highway, again, on my 4-hour highway drive. It does a pretty good job. Now occasionally it will still lose track of the road lines, even in good conditions, but I would say that 90% of the time it works very, very well. And yeah, it was a really nice system to have, just to give you that extra assistance. But yeah, it basically gives you all the safety equipment as standard. So you have automatic emergency braking. Now, if you want to go for blind spot monitoring and rear cross traffic alert, the base trim still doesn't get that. You have to go up to EX for that, but everything other than the base gets that. But it is worth noting some of the base trims of competitors do give you blind spot monitoring and rear cross traffic alerts. So just keep that in mind. But otherwise, everything else here comes standard on all of these. And again, if you want the park sensors though, and the 6 mile per hour or less automatic braking, that's going to be the areas where you're going to have to go up to EXL or higher. But yeah, out here on the highway too, again, you hear a little bit of road noise. We're going to go over a noisy patch here that'll accentuate that a little more. But once we get over this patch here and we smooth out a little bit, it should be pretty nice and smooth. And yeah, over again 4 hours of driving, I was never annoyed with the tire noise, because it's really, again, basically the same as a regular CR-V. So we have a gentle corner here we're going around. We'll just briefly try that out here and demonstrate. I'm kind of letting it do the steering for me, and it's doing a totally fine job here. One of the better, more reliable systems, really, for doing the steering assist and all that. Doing it in an unobtrusive way. Some of the others can be a little overreaching, and this is, very much kind of just doing it reliably in the background without constantly nagging you or making you a parent of its stuff. Now, I did turn off the road departure mitigation this week, which will give you that more assistance, but Honda system is usually one of the least obtrusive ones, so not a big deal if you leave it on, but it's nice you can leave it off. It stays off between key cycles, and it doesn't give you any kind of annoying warning message if you don't have it on. So I really like the way they've set up all the stuff here in this Honda sensing package that they call it. The one little annoyance I did have with the CR-V during my week with it here, though, is that the base of the A-pillar on the passenger side was rattling a little bit. It was subtle, but I was hearing it a good bit of the week here. I'm not sure why, and I'm sure it's not all of them, but just make sure if you're test driving one of these that the base of your A-pillar doesn't rattle there. Fuel economy for the CR-V TrailSport is going to be 38 mpg in the city, 33 on the highway, and 35 combined. So you do lose 2 mpg actually going for the TrailSport here in these tires versus a regular CR-V hybrid. So, is a loss of 2 mpg worth it for these tires? Again, with regular all seasons being completely fine, even on gravel and, a little bit of rocky roads and stuff, I don't know, it comes down to your personal preference there, I suppose, but it seems like probably not the best trade-off. It's nice that you have a hybrid available, because really it's this and the RAV4 that give you a hybrid with knobbier tires. So, definitely this is going to be much better fuel economy than all the other stuff that this competes with pretty much. But just know there is a penalty to pay there. Now, in my experience, my driving here, I've driven over 350 miles here over the course of the week, and I'd say that a majority of that was on the highway. I did do some around town as well, and before I did my 4-hour highway drive, I was seeing about 34.5 mpg. So actually less than the city rating. I was kind of expecting to get closer to the city rating, or closer to that combined figure, but I was about hitting that combined figure. But then when I was on the highway, and then the total average here for the full amount of driving, I've been averaging 36.4 mpg. So even though highway is supposed to drag down your fuel economy, in my driving it did bring it up. So again, kind of counterintuitive for a hybrid. Typically they're better in the city. So now I am actually beating the combined figure by 1, even though I guess you could say I was doing combined driving, but it wasn't purely highway or purely city. But anyway, this is kind of overperforming is the takeaway I'm getting, even though it's a little confusing. The takeaway is it is overperforming really what I was expecting, and even its own combined, estimate there. So that's really great. And again, the fact that you can have, all-terrain tires and get 36 mpg and still great driving dynamics, good amount of power and all that is very, very impressive. So I'm very happy with that. But the final thing to talk about here is the pricing and how it compares to the competition. So let's get into that. So the CR-V TrailSport costs $40,705 as tested, and there's no options for these aside from the paint, which is $455. And if you're interested in buying a CR-V or any vehicle for that matter, you're definitely going to want to head over to mapmaranmotoring.com and go to the new car quotes page. There you'll get access to dealer invoice pricing, as well as getting connected with a local dealer so you can check out the CR-V TrailSport for yourself and see what you think about it. So there's going to be a link in the description, as well as one in a pinned comment to take you straight to that site and get you all that info. Now, as far as how this compares to the competitors, like I said earlier, if you're interested in real off-road capability, the Subaru Forester Wilderness starts right around $40,000 as well, and has best-in-class 9.3 inches of ground clearance, skid plates, a unique suspension, off-road modes, water-resistant seats, and more. The downside is that it has about 25 less horsepower and a significant 69 less pound-feet of torque, and since it isn't a hybrid, it gets 9 less mpg combined as well. The Toyota RAV4 Woodland is the only other one other than the Honda that does a hybrid with all-terrain tires, and for the outgoing generation that's soon to be replaced, it'll come in slightly lower at $39,000. But that gives you a much weaker rear motor that won't be quite as good in really bad weather. It also gives you smaller screens and a pretty dated look at this point. The 2026 fixes most of that, but not the powertrain, and the pricing will likely go up for the 2026 model as well, but we don't have pricing at the time of me filming this. If you're okay to forego the hybrid, there are some better values if you just want a regular compact crossover with knobby tires and a slightly more aggressive look. The best value is the Mazda CX-50 Meridian that's just $35,000 and includes leatherette seats, satellite radio, and a bigger screen. And if you're willing to spend $42,500, you can get the punchy turbo model even with 320 pound-feet of torque, leather, and a heated steering wheel as well. The runner-up for best value is the Nissan Rogue Rock Creek, which is just $36,000 and also gives you leatherette seats, but not the digital gauges. It also doesn't drive as nice or feel quite as refined as the CR-V though, but it is significantly less expensive. Hyundai has a solid value as well with the Tucson XRT, which is $36,800 and also gives you leatherette and a bigger screen with satellite radio, but doesn't actually have a heated steering wheel. Lastly, the Kia Sportage X Pro Prestige actually got a refresh for 2026 as well, and it's $800 more expensive than the CR-V TrailSport, and it's not a hybrid, but instead it loads it up with a panoramic roof, ventilated leatherette seats, bigger screens, satellite radio, and a Harman Kardon stereo. So if you want the off-road stuff with all the bells and whistles, the Sportage will be the way to go there. But yeah, so overall, at the end of the day, the CR-V hybrid has a little niche for itself here. If you want a real all-wheel drive system that can actually send 50% to the rear and have a hybrid and all-terrain tires, this is going to be the only game in town for that unique combination. Now, if you have any flexibility, like if you don't need to have 50% of the power going to the rear, again, RAV4 hybrid does it, cheaper with the Woodland trim. And again, if you don't care about the hybrid thing, like I mentioned, there's the others that are going to give you, some really more impressive value and more impressive performance there, especially with the Forester Wilderness. And so it just comes down to, again, exactly what you want. But if you do happen to find yourself in that position where like you're bummed that Forester Wilderness isn't offered with a hybrid, and you don't want to just put all-terrain tires on a Forester hybrid yourself, you know, this is really the only other one that gives you that really good all-weather traction and a hybrid, and gives you, you know, the option for these tires here from the factory. And so for that buyer, this absolutely makes sense. And even just if you really like CR-V and just want a little bit of extra capability, I think it's really great. Otherwise, you know, I'd say save some money, go for one of the other trims and get more stuff. You know, there's, I'd say, some others that I'd personally go for if I'm spending this kind of money. But, you know, if you are someone who wants this exact combo that the TrailSport offers, then it's the only option, but it's a great option as well. So anyway, that's all of my thoughts here on the CR-V TrailSport. Let me know your thoughts on it in the comments below. Huge thanks to Honda for providing me here with this vehicle to review for you guys today. Yeah, thank you all very much for watching. Please leave a like and subscribe to keep these videos coming, and I'll see you guys on the next one. Take care.